In a move that stunned diplomats and economists alike, the Trump administration delivered what it called its final ultimatum to Canada just days ago. While threats of tariffs have been looming for months, this demand crossed into uncharted territory. The United States insisted that Canada provide American companies with preferential access to critical natural resources, oil, natural gas, minerals, and metals at prices significantly below global market rates. Not just discounts for emergencies or strategic alliances, but sustained below-cost sales to subsidize U.S. industries. This wasn't framed as a negotiation. It was presented as a non-negotiable condition to avert comprehensive tariffs that would devastate cross-border trade. Think about the audacity of that request. The U.S. government was essentially demanding that a sovereign neighbor sacrifice its own economic interests, transferring wealth from Canadian workers, companies, and taxpayers directly into American pockets to prop up a political narrative of America First dominance. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and his team reviewed the proposal in Ottawa and reached a swift conclusion: compliance would be suicidal. It would erode Canada's sovereignty, set a dangerous precedent for future bullying, and undermine decades of mutually beneficial integration. Instead of retaliating with matching tariffs or export bans, moves that would escalate into a full-blown trade war, Canada chose a subtler, more devastating path. Overnight, Ottawa quietly withdrew from long-standing voluntary supply chain coordination agreements. These are formal treaties, but informal frameworks built over 70 years, dating back to post-World War II cooperation. They ensured seamless, just-in-time deliveries, shared infrastructure planning, and guaranteed minimum flows for everything from automotive parts to energy pipelines. The consequences hit like a thunderbolt. Within hours, U.S. factories began receiving delay notices. Not outright bans, which would be easy to spin politically, but indefinite administrative holds and priority reallocations that disrupt production without providing clear legal recourse. Automotive plants in Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana, home to Trump's core supporters, ground to a halt as wiring harnesses, engines, and stamped metal parts from Ontario failed to arrive on schedule. Modern manufacturing runs on razor-thin inventories. A 3-day delay can idle thousands of workers. Construction sites across the Midwest and Northeast face similar shocks. Canadian lumber and steel shipments, critical for housing and infrastructure, slow to a trickle at the border. Projects backed by billions in federal funding now risk penalty clauses and overruns. Energy traders panicked as the rock-solid assumption of Canadian oil and gas reliability evaporated. Prices spiked not from actual shortages, but from the sudden injection of uncertainty into markets that prize stability above all. This backfire was spectacular because the Trump team fundamentally miscalculated leverage. They assumed economic size U.S. GDP dwarfing Canada's would force submission. But in hyper-integrated supply chains, the upstream controller holds the real power. Canada supplies over 60% of U.S. crude oil imports, vast amounts of electricity to the Northeast, and irreplaceable components for Detroit's auto industry. Alternatives exist in theory but require years and massive investment to scale. Corporate America, usually silent on trade spats, erupted in fury. CEOs from Ford, GM, and Stellantis flooded White House lines with dire warnings. Permanent market share losses to Asian and European rivals if lines stay down. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce issued emergency alerts projecting hundreds of thousands of immediate job risks. This wasn't abstract ideology. It was cold, hard operational reality crashing into political bravado. As the crisis unfolded overnight, one thing became clear: Trump's ultimatum didn't strengthen America. It exposed its vulnerabilities. Factories crippled, workers idled, prices surging, all because one side refused to be strong-armed. And Canada's response? Calm, calculated, and crippling. This is the collision of recklessness and reality, playing out faster than anyone in Washington anticipated. The morning after Canada's withdrawal hit, the American industrial heartland awoke to chaos. Plants that had hummed 24/7 suddenly fell silent. In Lordstown, Ohio, a major GM facility sent home over 5,000 workers as Canadian-sourced transmissions and electronics piled up at the border. Managers described it as just in time turning into just too late. No parts mean no assembly. No assembly means no vehicles rolling off the line. This isn't hyperbole. North American auto production is a single ecosystem where components cross the border 7 times on average before a finished car emerges. Delays of even hours cascade into shutdowns. By midday, 4 plants in Michigan and Kentucky followed suit, furloughing tens of thousands. Union leaders, many Trump voters in 2024, vented rage. We back toughness, but this is self-inflicted pain hitting our paychecks. Construction felt the blow next. From New York skyscrapers to Texas highways, Canadian softwood lumber and structural steel are staples. Shipments that once cleared customs in days now face enhanced inspections and for prioritization. Developers report delays triggering contractual penalties with billions in projects at risk. One major Midwest firm told reporters we're staring at cost overruns that could bankrupt subcontractors. Energy markets went haywire. Canadian oil flows through pipelines like Enbridge Line 5 and Keystone aren't stopped, but maintenance scheduling and flow adjustments introduce volatility. Traders bid up prices preemptively, fearing worse. Gasoline at pumps jumped 20 cents overnight in some states. Heating bills loom higher for winter. The uncertainty alone erased the reliability premium that kept North American energy stable. Why so fragile? Decades of efficiency optimization stripped buffers. Companies saved billions on inventory but became hostage to seamless borders. Trump's team dismissed warnings as globalist excuses, betting Canada would cave. Instead, Ottawa's move weaponized that fragility without firing a shot. Business leaders mobilized unprecedentedly. The National Association of Manufacturers projected 250,000 job losses in weeks if unresolved. Executives testified virtually to Congress. This isn't negotiation, it's economic sabotage. Even pro-Trump groups like the Auto Alliance begged for a reversal, citing irreversible damage as competitors in Mexico, less affected, and Asia ramp up. Republican lawmakers from affected states broke ranks, demanding emergency talks. Senators from Michigan and Ohio publicly urged de-escalation. Our workers can't wait for political points. Labor unions, bridging the political divide, warned of mass layoffs eroding Trump's base. The spectacle of strength crumbled under reality. Factories don't run on slogans. Workers don't pay mortgages with bravado. Consumers feel spikes at pumps and stores immediately. This overnight crippling revealed the ultimatum's fatal flaw, assuming asymmetry guarantees victory when interdependence cuts both ways. Canada's refusal wasn't defiance, for show it protected sovereignty while exposing U.S. overreach. As disruption spread, the narrative shifted from tough deal-making to catastrophic miscalculation. America's factories, crippled overnight, paid the price for an ultimatum that backfired spectacularly. Canada didn't lash out, they struck surgically. By withdrawing from voluntary coordination, Ottawa turned U.S. reliance into a liability. These agreements, informal but vital, facilitated everything from synchronized pipeline maintenance to priority border crossings for perishable components. Their absence creates plausible deniability, no bans, just unforeseen delays. The genius that hurts America more asymmetrically. Canada exports finished goods less dependent on U.S. inputs. America imports raw and semi-processed materials it can't quickly replace. Critical minerals for batteries, rare earths, nickel. Canada dominates supply to U.S. defense and green tech. Trump's demand stemmed from frustration over trade deficits and perceived imbalances. But demanding below-cost sales ignored economics, forcing losses on Canada would crash their industries, reducing supply anyway. It was coercion masked as strategy, ignoring that modern power flows through choke points, not just GDP. Ottawa saw the existential threat, agreeing would invite endless demands, refusing preserved independence. Carney's government accelerated diversification, deepening EU ties, Asian pacts signaling long-term decoupling. In Washington, panic set in. Advisors who pushed the ultimatum faced backlash as data rolled in. Idle capacity costing millions hourly, supply chains fracturing. Competitors gloated. European and Japanese automakers eyed market gains. Corporate boardrooms turned war rooms. Executives detailed to officials how little slack exists, days of inventory in some cases. Projections showed permanent shifts, companies eyeing reshoring or alternative sourcing, even at higher costs. The political fracturing accelerated. Trump's coalition cracked as Rust Belt governors demanded relief. Business donors, once cheering toughness, whispered retreat. Media spin struggled against images of shuttered plants and laid-off workers. This miscalculation echoes past blunders: China tariffs, bailing out farmers, Mexico threats forcing climb downs. But Canada differs. Deeper integration, stronger resolve, no quick fix here. Escalation worsens pain, retreat admits failure. Canada's response sent global ripples. Allies watched. If America bullies its closest partner, no one is safe. Investment flows shift toward predictable jurisdictions. Trust, once lost, triggers contingency planning worldwide. The ultimatum backfired because it treated interdependence as weakness, not strength. Canada's quiet revenge crippled U.S. factories, exposing fragility hidden by decades of cooperation. As the crisis deepened, one truth emerged: size doesn't conquer integration. Either respect it or suffer the consequences. Trapped. That's the word insiders use for the Trump administration now. The ultimatum assumed Canada would blink. When they didn't, no plan B existed. Escalation means accelerating shutdowns, tariffs triggering full retaliation. Retreat means admitting defeat, undermining the never backs down brand. Doubling down risks catastrophe. Comprehensive tariffs would halt compliant flows under USMCA exemptions, idling more factories, spiking inflation, layoffs in hundreds of thousands, consumer pain at pumps, stores. Political support evaporates as kitchen table realities override rallies. De-escalating requires face-saving compromise, perhaps quiet withdrawal of demands, but critics, even within the base, would pounce. Proof toughness fails against resolve. Trump's identity hinges on perceived invincibility. Concession shatters it. The coalition fractures visibly. Red state senators beg intervention. Business leaders distance themselves as balance sheets bleed. Labor warns of permanent losses. Even loyalists question dominance causing collapse isn't strength, it's failure. Broader damage, institutional credibility erodes. Allies reassess U.S. reliability, accelerating de-dollarization, alternative alliances, companies redesign chains, building buffers at efficiency's expense. Decisions stick. Integration fragments quietly. Canada presses advantage, diversifying aggressively. No waiting for Washington contradictions. Ties with Europe, Asia deepen. Less dependence on volatile partners is vulnerability. Tragedy, avoidable. Supply chains broke from theater, not necessity. Workers' families bear costs while architects remain insulated. Disconnect corrodes trust domestically, internationally. Washington faces reckoning. Can leadership relearn responsible power? Leverage cuts both ways. Unpredictability drives partners away. Canada's stand exposed this sovereignty matters. Trust finite, bullying integrated systems self-harms, no clean exit, escalation or retreat, both costly, unhideable. Ultimatum's collapse reveals bravado without contingency. As factories stay crippled, spectacle collides with governance substance. This crisis's deepest impact unfolds quietly post-headlines. American firms redesign supply chains, reducing U.S.-Canada exposure, redundancy over efficiency, higher costs for predictability, investments shift to stable jurisdictions. North American integration, generational build, fragments via boardroom decisions. Canada accelerates away trade diversification, not rhetoric, but reality. New pacts, infrastructure for non-U.S. exports. No future ultimatum holds same threat. Global lesson. U.S. willingness to weaponize ties with closest ally signals risk. No immunity. Strategies adjust accordingly. Domestically, polarization strains further. Executive disruption without checks scrutinized. Trade experts vindicated, lawmakers distanced from fallout. Real economy forces reckoning logistics over ideology. Trucks, pipelines, lines, don't pause for narratives. Consequential effect, exposure of vulnerability. Assumed eternal cooperation despite contempt, tested and failed. World watches outcomes, not briefings. Can U.S. sustain partnerships without weaponization? Leadership grasp, leverage versus self-harm? Strength without restraint sabotages. Toughness driving away partners weakens. Canada's refusal demonstrated sovereignty endures. Trust finite, largest economies can't bully created systems. Truth visible now won't fade. Reliability squandered. Contingency replaces trust. Old system won't return unchanged. Tragedy. Workers, communities pay for elevated theater over stewardship. Complexity treated weakness. Dominance pursued disregarding prosperity foundations. Question, relearn discipline power in interdependent worlds. Canada's spectacular backfire exposure reshapes incentives, alliances permanently. Ultimatum crippled factories overnight, legacy endures far longer.